Welcome back, everyone, to the Superhost Labs podcast. My name is Sarah. This is my partner, Emily.
Hi.
Sorry, I usually let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Emily. I'm here.
She made it. And we are the Carwells. Today, we have a very special guest, Zoey. Hello, Zoey.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We have connected with Zoey so many times through our social media journey specifically. That's where we originally connected with her, and I'm sure if you guys know us from TikTok, you definitely also know her. So it's always fun having these moments of overlap.
Yeah.
As always, we start every episode with an Airbnb horror story. And for those of you who have watched Zoey's TikToks, I'm sure you might even be familiar with her horror stories, but we are going to reiterate them here because they are always entertaining. So Zoey, we will let you kick it off.
Okay. To preface, I will say Airbnb has like 95% amazing things. So, these happen once in a while, but we are located in a pretty winter area. The home is at 8,000 feet, so tons of snow, in one of the most snow-packed areas in the country. And one of the most entertaining but also headache guests we had this winter. They were actually from Michigan, which I'm from Michigan, so I don't like to undermine the Midwest, but obviously we don't have mountains in the Midwest, so it's just a little different. And they got up there. This is why you disclose to your guests that you have certain requirements to get to the property or for someone to book. So I require 4-wheel drive or all-wheel during the winter because you honestly won't make it. They started off the trip without 4-wheel or all-wheel. They said the rental company only had 2-wheel drive, and I was like, that's red flag number one, that you're in Colorado and you cannot get a 4-wheel drive vehicle for a reason. So they somehow got an Uber to drop them off to the home, but left their car in town, which is about 15 minutes away. And the next day, she's asking me if I have anyone that can drive her into town. And I'm like, I'll ask our team, but we don't really provide transportation services. So I talked to our team. They couldn't get there till 10 p.m. So I got a text at 2:30. The sun sets at 5:30. And she said, we are walking into town. And mind you, this is an 8-mile walk down probably a 3,000 foot elevation in probably 5 feet of snow. And I was just like, I highly, highly, highly do not encourage you to walk. I checked the cameras and you could see a storm was rolling in. The valley was just so dark. And I was like, oh my goodness, we are going to have a catastrophe. And I'm calling her. I'm like, do not walk. I will see if I can get a taxi or call an Uber. Our location's kind of hard to get, so not a ton of people pick up. And I will never forget our guest telling me that she's walking down the road where there's 2 neighbors. I was like, you won't pass someone. Trust me, you will not pass anyone. And then I think I was able to find a pickup for the next 3 hours. So I got them to turn around, but I was, a remote completely across the country, just trying to tell them how serious that was to actually do something like that. So that was entertaining. It wasn't a complete horrifying event, but it was very stressful as a host, just knowing that safety was a worry. And they didn't understand that. I was bears, mountain lions, we have very harsh environments out here. And the Midwest just doesn't have that. So that was entertaining, to say the least.
Oh my gosh.
Just stressed thinking about it. It just not understanding the danger that they were putting themselves in between wildlife and weather and just length alone. 8 miles, you've got to be kidding me. No.
Yeah, and that's the thing about people from the Midwest. We think that we know what winter is. And then I went to Colorado recently, and I had a Jeep at the time. I have one now, but it was a different one. And we were driving up the mountain, and people are flying past us, and my husband driving, and I'm sitting there so tense because it's a snowstorm going up the mountain. I was like, I don't know. No, Michigan's not like this. I was freaking out.
Mm-hmm. It is next level. And I'm from Michigan, so, I can relate to the Midwest. I thought I knew winter, but when you don't have elevation, we've had people request, can you come salt the driveway? And I'm like, we actually don't use salt in the West. Salt is not a thing. It's mad chloride or, sand and dirt. So we get a lot of Midwest visitors. So I try to disclose things in your listing, and that's why I encourage yourself to do that if you have something or a unique property like that, because it will only help you. And we disclosed it for our entire winter season, and we still had 3 guests show up with a 2-wheel drive car. So it doesn't always work.
Gosh.
I mean, we have to disclose that at our lake house in the Midwest too. Like, there's just to get into our property, it's a big U driveway that faces downhill, and so it's just one of those things where I'm like, it might only happen once a year, but especially if there's just like a solid layer of ice and then a thin layer of snow on top, like they're gonna wreck their car and it's gonna end up in our Airbnb. For the love of God, please do not.
Yes.
It's so stressful. Okay, well, for our listeners that do not know who you are and are just getting to know you, will you give us kind of an elevator pitch of who you are and your background?
Yeah, so I am Zoey. I am 24 years old. We have 2 Airbnbs, scaling to a 3rd as we speak. Hopefully, everyone, this market, who knows if that'll happen. But we do have a traditional Airbnb and a glamping Airbnb, which is super unique to see the differences in managing the 2 and also the similarities. We do travel almost full time in a van around the country. So we have managed our properties all the way from Greece to Tahiti around the country. And I help others, start their journey, as well as I started traditionally in like the personal finance space. So people wanting to manage their money better. And, it kind of came into Airbnb because the more you manage your money, the more you can invest and do with it and become more passively income driven. So it's been a unique experience. But yeah, I started sharing our journey on TikTok and it blew up before my eyes more than I ever expected. And here we are. So yeah.
Yes, and we love your story. I mean, I think, to touch on the fact that you have this personal finance background, that's interesting, right? And I think that that's exactly kind of the corner of the market that you've capitalized on. Because so many people in the space will be like, oh, like the easiest way to get into Airbnb is co-hosting, and that's where you start. And I just couldn't disagree with that more. I'm like, look, if you can't manage your finances before you start investing in an Airbnb, you're not going to be able to manage your finances when you have an Airbnb. Like, that's not a solution to your financial problem. So seeing you kind of handle it on that front end is definitely a gap in the market that needed to be filled.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of when I started managing my money at 2021, 3 or 4 or 5 years of managing your money responsibly can completely change your life. And I've lived it. And I only teach and coach and preach what I've lived myself. But it's not just Airbnb. That's like the end goal, the final straw of all the years of managing your money correctly. But I say the same thing. If you can't manage your personal expenses, what makes you think you're going to be able to manage a business expenses that are 10 times the amount? So
1000%. Absolutely. Well, Emily, I'll let you kick off the questions since I always talk so much.
So you gave us a little bit of your finance background, but how did your journey in real estate start? So like, you're from Michigan, but how did you find the properties in Colorado and decide to go in that direction?
Yeah, so it was actually, we created kind of a business out of a misfortune, I guess, which is a lot of opportunities form that way. So we had a long-term home, and we never thought twice. Long-term rentals are extremely passive because you really don't talk to the person ever. To give you some background, this person was paying maybe $100, $200 more than the mortgage. So like, really, we were just breaking even on the property. That renter very unexpectedly told us they were moving out, and we were like, oh, you are? Okay, great. We actually didn't really know what to do. This was in the middle of COVID, and we knew we didn't want to live there. We didn't really want to pay for a $2,000 plus mortgage without, wanting to be there. So we were like, should we sell the property? Like, what should we do with it? Should we get another long-term renter? And we had actually tried Airbnb a little bit on our own property when we were traveling a lot. So it wasn't a full-time Airbnb property. So we had some experience with just getting people in and out and the turnovers. And this was kind of our first full-time property emphasis, where we were completely remote across the country. We just had an idea, like, the house was for sale at the time that the Airbnb listing went live. Which I don't really advise, but we shot the price way up. So we're like, if it sells, like, we'll be seeing if that ever happens. And we flew in for 72 hours, furnished the entire property. You have to be very proactive when you're remote about what things are there and how you can furnish it. We furnished it just with what we had. We really had no idea of what this business could become. And it started booking. And ever since then, it's covered the mortgage ever since, which is my goal every month. I don't have these unrealistic expectations to profit 10,000 every single month. I keep it very simple. Like the goal is to cover the expenses. And if it does more than that, great. It has always made a profit, but I think people really set themselves up for disappointment when you go into a business thinking, I want to make 5,000-10,000 a month. And if it doesn't do that, it's not working. Like you have a property being paid for by someone else. That's exceptional. Can we just talk about that? So that was our first like full-time Airbnb. And we had a glamping property that was being rented on the side. We were living in it, and we decided once we saw the success to just turn it into a full-time. So it became 2 full-time Airbnbs in a matter of like 6 months, pretty unexpectedly. I didn't have social media. I didn't know what this like Airbnb craze was about. We were just like winging it. Like we didn't have to like, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't rent? It was just like, what else do we have to work with? Like it's for sale, and let's just, once we started getting pretty good bookings and profit, we decided to take it off the market because, you know, someone inquired to see our financials, and I was like, you know, if they want to buy the house for Airbnb, I think we should keep it.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too to hear that you guys kind of like, you know, didn't plug into any sort of a community that like pushed you into Airbnb. It was just kind of a natural progression, because that resonates a lot. That was like very much our story, where we were just like, we had an apartment. We didn't even know that like at the time, most apartments, it was like illegal to Airbnb. And we were just like, oh, you know, we see people doing this. Let's like take like a few pictures with our iPhones and like rent it out on the weekends that we travel. And then all of a sudden it's like booking in like 4 seconds after you put it online, and you're like, what? Like, this is insane. So sometimes I feel like when people stare at influencers like us in the space where we've been doing it forever, it might be like overwhelming to a certain degree, where they're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to reach where they're at? And so I feel like we were like sheltered in like this weird way, where we were just like, nah, I don't care. Let's like try it out.
It's so true. So many people ask me like, what were your fears when you got started? And I was like, we literally had a week from like, let's do this to let's furnish it. Like you don't even have time to think about the fears. And it's, I mean, everything I tell people to do now when it's getting started, like run the numbers, do the comps, none of that happened. Like I didn't know any of the Airbnbs locally. I was just like, let's just wing it. You know, his iPhone photos. I even used some of this is just like embarrassing, but it shows where you start. We had the home for sale. So a realtor went in and took photos, and the house was empty. And I used some of those photos of like the kitchen, because the kitchen isn't really like that much different when it's stock. And people would ask me like, is there furniture in it? Like, I just want to make sure.
We've done the same thing.
Yeah. Imagine if there wasn't. I'm sure some hosts like literally probably didn't have furniture in there.
I know. I'm sorry that you have to ask that, because yes, there's furniture, but I was like, you know, they were better than iPhone photos, so I just like went with it. But obviously we've evolved from that. So.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing right now with our lake house in Michigan, because we bought it in September, and obviously our busiest months are in the summer. And whoever the realtor was, she had the professional photos taken at the end of summer, and so like we don't like, there just hasn't been a summer yet, so we're like still pulling the pictures from the Zillow listing and advertising it on the Airbnb, and just waiting for July to hit so we can actually rephotograph it.
Yeah, you got to make it work. I don't think people realize like we're doing this as a business, but we're still like making it work, learning, pivoting along the way. No one has it down to like an exact science, honestly. If they do, I'd love to talk to them.
I know. And every time I think that I've got it all figured out, like now joining Superhost Labs and being like very shoulder to shoulder with so many other hosts, I'm like, I still only have like 10% of it figured out. Like, there's just so much. But that's what's fun about it, you know? There is just so much room for growth. So if you are a host out there and you are experiencing brick walls of any sorts, and you're like running into problems, there are absolutely solutions. Trust us, you do not have it all figured out.
Yes.
Okay, so number 2, we kind of already asked you this. What is your niche? Do you want to kind of elaborate, I guess, more so on the differences between your glamping and your typical single family home?
Yeah, so it's super interesting having both because you see different niches of the market and people talk about glamping or they talk about traditional homes, and we have both. Honestly, the processes, the automation, very, very similar. Personally, at the moment, I might change my mind this summer, but I don't have instant book on for our glamping property because it is a glamping property. In the beginning, I did, and then I was starting to get people's comments and feedback like, it doesn't have AC, just so you know. And I was like, you thought a yurt would have AC? Like, that's my bad. That like I didn't get that. Like I was just like I thought that was expected. So that's how I kind of learned like never assume because you probably are overestimating the knowledge level of some people. So we don't have instant book on, and we also have a pretty good amount of disclosures. Our property, it's not a 10. It has water, it has power, electricity, heat, but I see a lot of glamping properties that say like you must read the entire description before booking, and I think that is super smart for glamping properties because it's just a little different, and you hope that that person understands that when booking, but they might not, and you really need to know that you like get that across in the beginning. And traditional home is so turnkey in a way because it can really make anyone happy. You have like four walls, you have the creature comforts that people expect. So it is a breeze hosting a traditional home most of the time. Obviously, there's sometimes it's not, but a glamping property, you have to be more aware. We don't allow like crawling babies because the yurt is elevated and, God forbid something happened. It's just, you have to think about those things because it's not the same bulletproof structure as a home, and glamping properties will likely not last forever, the same duration as a home. But very similar processes. You just need to convey the properties accurately in a good way for you to have successful bookings and reviews and like great stays. And if you don't do that, it will show in like your reviews and the experiences and feedback you get. I had someone say like they were disappointed that there wasn't a TV in the bedroom. This is a yurt, mind you, like 27 square feet, like 27 feet radius. We're like working with a small space. They wanted a TV in the like in the living room and the bedroom, and I was like, you guys, like a TV is like I almost want to take the TV down because it's glamping. So you just want to make sure you convey that you don't have that like home creature comfort all the time. So.
1000%. That's so interesting too, because it's like I feel like everyone like glamorizes a unique stay in their head, and then they like still think it's gonna have like the hotel standard, and you're like, that's not the point.
Yeah, and ours is like, I would say, given the creature comforts we do offer, that's why we can charge a higher nightly rate, because you can shower, the fact that the yurt has laundry is beyond me. Like I can't even believe we put laundry in it, and like I'm like, that is like the most random need to me in a year, but it does make our cleaning team turn over a lot easier. But yeah, you definitely want to make sure people understand that there's no AC or there's limited heat. I always say like whatever the temperature is outside, it's maybe minus plus 10 degrees. Like we're working with the elements here. So the yurt is not open full time due to the extreme elements.
What months is it shut down?
So we shut it down from, honestly, we've gotten a few snowfalls, but once it becomes under 40 degrees continuously, I've stayed in it in 35 degrees. It is not enjoyable. I don't care how romantic or cute staying in a yurt in the winter is. It's not cute until when you're doing it. There is a wood fire burning stove, but we take on the responsibility to not rent it and let renters use that feature just because people are not the smartest. And the vacancy and occupancy in the winter is not usually like it's below 80% usually. So to keep a wood fire burning stove going and that property warm and like welcoming is more work than it is payouts, honestly. So we close it from maybe like November to March. And that's honestly like the pretty extreme snowfall that it would honestly be a liability to have people up there too. So
yeah,
that's our choice.
I have a question that's not on our list. How hard was it to get like a cleaning team and maintenance people because you are remote and like you said, there's like, if you're walking on the street, you're not running into anybody. So how hard was that for you to find that team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Another thing getting started that I never thought about. Like I was like, oh wow, we need a cleaning like the things that come up. I kid you not, you just solve them while they're happening. We actually did word of mouth. We were in the area. We talked to some of our neighbors and they were like, oh, you should reach out to blah, blah, blah. she's awesome. She's always around. She's kind of known as like on this, she doesn't live on our street, but she's like in 10-minute radius. She's known as like the person who will watch her chickens, watch her kids, like just do all the things. So I reached out to her. I brought her up to the house, which I always think you should do with your cleaners if you can, is like show them the house, show them your expectations, where things are. And word of mouth did the job. We've worked with her ever since. We still work with her. She's like my number one texting buddy, I think, because I talk to her all the time. But if that was an issue, I actually have seen people asking other Airbnbs in the area if they would refer a cleaning person. And I think that is super smart. That would probably be my next go at it, because I prefer to work with an individual than a company. So it wasn't super difficult. We did get lucky, but your cleaning person is the livelihood of your business, and do not pay them cheaply. Do not take it lightly. It's a super important job, especially remote. But we do have some backups. If she couldn't clean, we can survive. But I always say you need a cleaner that's a homesteader, because that's like the best option, because they don't go anywhere. She goes like once a year, and I can't believe that, but she loves her little home. So that's perfect for us.
Yeah. Sounds very similar to our cleaners currently. Like same thing. We were just like relying on word of mouth and like local Facebook groups. And we ended up getting connected with someone who ironically lived 2 doors down from our Airbnb.
Which is so nice.
We were in a Facebook group that was the entire county, which like spans an hour drive. Like the likelihood that the one person to reach out was 2 doors down from us was just an absolute godsend. And same thing. They don't leave. They're they both honestly are on disability, and one had a really awful car accident, and they just like are big homebodies. They love the lake. Like they've been there their entire lives, and they honestly thought they were going to have to leave the lake because they couldn't figure out like a working situation that didn't require them to like drive forever. So it's just been the best of both worlds, and they care for our property like it is their own.
It's so nice having someone close by, because even if it's not a cleaning, like things being checked on, like a storm, or do you mind checking if the power's out? Like those things do happen, and it's not as much of a burden for them to go there because they're so close. But I also feel so much better as a business to support someone individually and their family, and I know where it's going, and I can talk to her, and the accountability is there. And I give her bonuses, and I pay her extra all the time because I want to support her, and like I know what a big sacrifice she makes to make our business run, and I want to do the same for her. So
1000%. A little feel good in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think I asked a sporadic question, but I am next. I'm asking questions. I'm going to combine 2 of them. So you kind of talked about how when you went to furnish the first one, you just kind of used what you had. So, or like really quickly put it together. So what was the initial investment to get started? And then with this new project that you're trying to get into, how much did you budget to get a new one started?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the home that was like completely vacant and we had to furnish it in 72 hours, I'm going to say it was around like a $4,000 to $5,000 investment on a credit card, mind you. Just swipe the credit card. And I'm going to say more so since the improvements and the, things we've updated, the property maybe would be more of like a $10,000 to $15,000 investment, depending what you consider as a furnishing that was required and just a want. But we did, I'm not going to say the bare minimum, but I'm not going to say we did the most, because I was pretty impressed with how many people still rented it, given that it just had the basics. And I think that shows that if you don't have the capital in the beginning, because a lot of people don't, unless you're planning really ahead of time and you know that you need to have furnishing costs as well as your down payment and everything, it can still rent and book and make a profit. I will say I was comparing numbers from the year that it was barely furnished to what it is now, and we have doubled every month. And I'm going to say that's not a coincidence to me. I don't think the area is like any more booming too much. I really think it was like what the home looks like. But yeah, we put it on a credit card and just like took the proceeds from the first month and a half and paid that credit card back, which I'm not saying is the best thing to do. Now I advise all the people I work with and clients to do it differently. But just to show you guys that are listening that you don't have to have it all perfect to make this work. We literally took the couch that was in our glamping Airbnb that was closed and brought it over to the house because we were like, buying a couch is so expensive. And then when it became time to open the other property, we're like, well, we're down a couch, so what are we gonna do? Like, we were making it all work. Like, mattress came over with us because we didn't want to buy all the mattresses. So I'm pretty sure I think we literally cleared out the other property that was closed and just put it all into the one that was needing to be open. So
yes,
it's better to get started than like jump off the ledge. I think we've said this before, like start with what you have and then build from there, but start and realize that you're going to build from there. Because like,
and like now we have profit.
Start, you won't start. Yeah, exactly.
Like you can put, like, I feel so much better putting profit now into things we can afford to improve it.
Yeah, 1000%. And also, I mean, honestly, it's like, it just speaks to the fact that like the people who are in this industry, who are enjoying it, who are successful at the end of the day are to our core problem solvers. Yeah. Like, it's just, you have to be like, it truly at the beginning is not a set it up and forget it situation. Eventually it does turn into that where it's very automated. You've worked out all the kinks. It's like much less stressful. But I mean, especially in the first like 3 to 9 months, like it's your baby, it's hands-on. It's going to require your time, your attention, your energy, all of it. Okay, so the second question that Emily had asked there is what you are budgeting for your property that you're looking at purchasing now.
Yeah, good question. So we are, well, I don't want to speak too soon, but we have seen the profit that glamping brings, and we've seen the initial investment. Also, a lot of people listening probably are going, I think a lot of us relate to, I know this is one of your questions, I'm pretty sure, but the hardest thing can be financing. And so many of us relate to that. I've talked to many people. I've listened to your guys' podcast. Previous people have said the same thing. And glamping does not always require a traditional loan process and, banking, relationship. So we are budgeting to pay the entire thing in cash. So please say a prayer for us. I'm going to say our sweet spot is 100,000 can we do this with 100,000? And I'll give some context that the yurt was done for 40 to 50,000 complete, and the yurt is more than what's like necessity to live there. Like it has laundry, it's on a deck and everything. So we're hoping around 100,000 can be a sufficient investment to get another property up and running. Honestly, just because with interest rates rising and the availability on the market, I just am like, I feel so much better putting our money into something that we know the return is there because we've experienced it. And I talk to I help a lot of people with glamping, and they say the same thing, that they might not get approved for a loan, or they're younger, but they have a ton of capital, and it's a great route to go. And the profit with glamping is, I mean, the yurt paid itself off in 12 months. Like now it's all just profit, and it has very minimal expenses. So we'll see if that 100,000 gets the job done. But I think when you get more into the industry, you get more aware of like the cost and the people you can work with. We have quite a few friends that build these setups that we can like pay at cost and know where the money's going, which is a big thing with glamping, because you can pay a lot for a glamping property if you don't source it correctly, honestly, especially now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you make a really good point too. It's like, the further you get into it, like when you start talking Airbnb strategy and you're comparing arbitrage versus glamping versus single family versus all these other things, I mean, you have to be strategic about it. And especially for us at the beginning, like we started in arbitrage, and same thing with glamping. You don't have necessarily all of the tax benefits that you do with single family homes, right? But that's not necessarily the play at the beginning. Like a lot of times the play at the beginning is you want as much cash flow as possible. You want as much time in this industry as possible. Like loans become easier the longer that you're in it. More money you have, everything becomes easier. So I think that like the glamping move, especially at the beginning, is like such a smart way to like ease your way into real estate investing and really build a solid foundation for everything that you want to do further on down the road.
100%. Honestly, glamping is, I mean, the yurt has like $100 in expenses a month. Like there's, it's like,
wow,
we're profiting after that. So I'm not saying that's for everyone. It depends on like your land and how you acquired the land and everything. But glamping is I know people that can set up a glamping property for $5,000. Like that's crazy that you can do that, and you own that, whether you sell it to someone because they want to do Airbnb in a year and you don't like it, versus arbitrage is the same, cost to set up, and you own the things and the land, or lease the land. So we'll see. But I just personally, like, we weighed the options. Like, we could get a house or we could do this. And this glamping property, like, I was like, I want to live there. Like, I don't even want to put this on Airbnb. So we'll see if it comes through. But we've looked at multiple properties in the last few months, and we've just weighed all of our pros and cons, which I think you just have to make a decision and act on it, because you will find pros and cons and reasons not to do something for months and years if you don't act.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When you're looking at this next glamping situation, are you looking at something that you can continue to build on and add multiple glamping sites to?
Yeah, so we are, yes, we're looking to be able to expand, and we're also looking at glamping options that are not permanent, meaning like the property is not permanent. So if we decided we wanted to relocate, we could bring it with us and move it somewhere. Or if we decided that we wanted to, lease land for 6 months here and then bring it back 6 months there, it could be done. But glamping communities are exceptional, and there's a lot of areas where glamping is happening that you can do that pretty easy. And a lot of people ask me, well, like, how do you start glamping and the laws in the county? Literally just call the county and tell them what you want to do. I have experienced it myself. I've called the counties in northern Arizona, and they literally tell you, oh, you want to have 5 yurts? Yeah, you need to have a campground permit. This is how you do it. This is when we review it. This is when we'll talk to you. Done. And it's like, there's no excuse to not be able to make a quick 5-minute phone call. So definitely expanding, but you do need to be aware of like the land laws, and some properties don't allow you to do multiple units, or you have to have like a home and an ADU. So you want to obviously follow the legality, but when something is temporary, you are, hovering along that line of what's, the regulation. I'm not going to say like break the laws or anything, but it's temporary. It's on wheels. Like, it can be moved if it had to. It's not a permanent structure. So the permitting doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same as a house.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't even that makes so much sense too. I mean, you get to take advantage of seasonality if it's on wheels.
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, that county comes in and decides they don't want Airbnb anymore.
Off you go. Next property.
Off you go. Yeah. We're moving to the next piece of land.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, and I honestly, anytime I've ever thought of glamping previous to this conversation, it's like, I've always seen it as like this higher risk investment, because it might be more difficult to sell down the road than, say, a single family home, or you can't really switch it to like a long-term rental if there's a downturn in the market, all of these other things. But you're right. There are so many points that make it a huge plus as well. So
yeah, I also think with the real estate landscape changing, because my dream is to have land with a bunch of storage container units on it, but people are actually buying Airbnbs specifically now, and glamping units are included in that. Before, it was you can't sell it because it's not a home, but you can literally just sell your Airbnb business at this point. So I think the value is different now than maybe it used to be with these kind of proproperties.
Yeah.
1000%.
And we had a long-term renter. He was almost a caretaker in our yurt. He just kind of took care of the land. He lived there for free. He did all the snow plowing. So you're not going to have the biggest, audience that wants to long-term rent a glamping unit, but a storage container home, that is a sufficient residence for someone to live in. You're not living in a Lotus tent or something. So, and you can sell it. People are selling these directly to go on Airbnb, or they're buying the land, putting the container there. And I talked to someone who has been live on Airbnb for 1 month, and he's selling the entire property. And I was just like, wow, it's literally turnkey if you wanted it.
Yeah, that's what we're starting to do. We just posted our first one today. That's a turnkey one that's for sale. And it's you just, it's kind of an untapped market. I mean, we'll see. There's a million trillion people out there who see the value in Airbnb who don't want to lift a finger. So we'll see. We'll see what that brings. We're charting new territory.
I love it.
Okay, so next question we have for you is, what is your range of profitability per property per month in between your two properties that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously with glamping, the expenses are lower. So the profit is pretty substantial, because really any income is pretty much profit. Obviously there's some expenses. If you're leasing your land, you might have to pay $500, $1,000. But utilities are pretty minimal. If you have a 600-gallon water tank, you fill it up every 3 months for $180. So there's just less expenses there. So our glamping, I mean, our glamping property in last September made more than the traditional house. And I was absolutely blown away. Like I was like, a 4-person tent made more than a 6-bedroom, like 6-person, 3-bedroom house. But it's the experience. You can't cap that. People will pay huge. And it was September, which is more of a couple traveling month than families because of school. So the year can make, I'm going to say it's on average like it can make $4,000 to $8,000, $9,000 depending. And the house has made anywhere from double the mortgage all the way to 10 times the mortgage. So the house did given to our seasonality. It is exceptional what summer does. And then winter, we just like ride it out and it's like always covering the expenses and there's always profit in our pocket. But I was blown away at what summer can bring. And I was like, we are making 10 times the mortgage this month. Like that's absurd. And we actually took a lot of that profit and put it back into the property to improve it and make it, worth more. And honestly, the property wasn't really finished. Like we were like, it honestly needed a little bit of work. So we were like, let's take the money and let's just finish it out. We took like a week off the calendar and just like did insane work on the home. So that's another part of Airbnb is you can improve your own home, boost the value, build that equity with someone else's money. Obviously it's your money. People always tell me that. They're like, it's not someone else paying your mortgage. Like that's your money still. And I'm like, yeah, but like you get the point. Like it didn't come out of my bank account necessarily because it came from them. So
yeah. And also it's not requiring you 50 hours of a work week. I guess it's like, okay, maybe it is my money, but it's not requiring me nearly as much time as it would require anyone else to afford these renovations. So
exactly.
Yeah, I think we experience or are going to experience that same thing with our Michigan lake house. Like now that, like going from arbitrage to a purchase property, like the arbitrage books out like 4 days in advance, right? We like go into a month at like maybe 50% occupancy and we end each month over like 85 to 90% occupancy. And so it is like a very last minute booking situation. Whereas like the lake house, because Michigan summers are crack for Michiganders, they're like, oh my gosh, we have to like get out and be on a lake and like do the thing. Our summer is already just booked. It's booked. And we're like, oh no, did we undercharge?
I know, that is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And still we're like, in the months of June and August, we're looking at pulling in between $7,000 and $10,000 profit after mortgage and expenses are paid. And we're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. And you do have to like ride it out. Like people, like I said, like we've made 10 times the expenses and we've made double. And that's where I think you need to be realistic about like your occupancy is not going to be 100 every single month. Your seasonality, I'm sorry, unless you're in like, a very temperate place where it's just like consistent, it's just not always going to be that way. And we always think like, okay, it's summer, we're going into our peak income months. So if we want to spend more on renovations or do something, this is the time to do it. But we have a booking in August for 3 weeks and it covers the entire year of expenses. So like everything we've made up until this point could be considered profit. And summer is just beyond, honestly. It's depending where you are. Arizona, not so much.
Yeah. I think San Diego is the only place I know where it's like the same temperature all the time, and who can afford a house in San Diego? So
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the regulation there is pretty strict. I mean, it's California, so I would imagine.
I know in condos, because my husband Tyler, his uncle had a condo in San Diego, and we were trying to convince him. He ended up selling it. We were trying to convince him to just Airbnb it out because it's like near Mission Bay. And so he had like a view of Mission Bay, super nice place, and his condo wouldn't let him do it. And I was like, no, this is perfect. Like it's a big condo, but whatever. Yeah. I hate regulation.
And I think too, when we talk about seasonality, like we get questions all the time in consultations about like, what do you do if there's like, it's an off season and you don't even make the mortgage? Like, at least personally, I have yet to experience that. Like right now we're going with the lake house, we're going through our slowest season of the year because it's Michigan spring and it is the nastiest time of year. It's just right muddy, wet, windy, cold, kind of warm, like all over the place. So when you're looking at AirDNA projections and now we're experiencing that too, we're like, okay, what are we expecting? Like we just put it on the market. Your first quarter is typically your slowest quarter ever because you're just kind of ramping up. And we still made $2,000 profit as a brand new Airbnb in the slowest month of the year. And I'm like, don't worry about seasonality. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on to the next one. What would you say has been the biggest challenge with real estate investing?
I think I have like two parts to this. The biggest challenge with like Airbnb in itself is I think honestly, you're almost sometimes better off to just like tunnel your journey. Like I almost feel like sometimes when we started before I knew so many people doing it, like we made decisions so much faster, so much easier. And now you see all these people doing it and you see all this success and you're just like doubting, am I going to have that success that they're having with this property? And that is challenging. And that's like the power and the pros and the cons of social media. So I think to those getting started and even those that are in it, like don't think that we don't doubt our investments because real estate is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's probably the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life. And I think we talk about, oh, buying this house or that house and this Airbnb so freely. And it's like, do you actually realize like the amount of money, the structure you're buying, like this is a huge deal. So I think that has some challenge with those getting started. And I think also a biggest challenge in just real estate in general is you're never sure if it's the right time and you don't know if the loan's going to be what you want and it's not going to be the rate you want, it's not going to be the price you want or the house you want. And it's like nothing's going to be usually perfect, and if it is, you're like the 1% that gets to experience real estate like that, which I honestly don't think anyone has. So I think that just in itself, real estate, whether you're doing long-term, short-term, you're house hacking, there's always going to be a negative. That real estate is like the most evolving, ever-changing market. And there's really nothing like it. Like you just have to dive in and experience it to really grasp how crazy it can be. But Airbnb in itself has its challenges when it comes to just unique guests that you can never prepare for. You never can guess what they're going to ask or what they're going to need. I've had many situations, but you just have to understand, that's a one-off guest and it's not you that's doing that. And you're doing a good job. You just can't please everyone. It's like I had someone, she said she walked in and just like didn't get a good vibe and wanted to like get a night refund, and I was like
she didn't get a good vibe.
I'm like, oh my God.
Get a piece of paper and a pen and write this down. Get fucked.
Yeah, like
no. Absolutely not.
And she just like kept bothering me with questions like, where's this, where's that? And I was like, you know what, I would like gladly refund you a night. Like instead of your 3-day stay, it's going to be 2 days, and I'm happy with that, and I don't care about losing a $400 night right now because you're giving me a headache, and you just got to like take that as a host and just understand it's the business.
Yeah, at that point you're just like, if you wanted a discount, just start there. Like, just
right?
ask for it.
Well, and the funny thing is, before she showed up, she asked if she could move her stay like back a day. And I was like, oh, we have like a same day turnover. So someone's checking out the day you're checking in. So I would have backed it up. And then she's like, I need a refund for that last day. And I was like, but did you like always need that refund? Like, is your not a good vibe your excuse that like you were going to do that regardless? So, that's just like the name of the game sometimes. But
yeah. There's always going to be those people. It's hospitality. There's no way you're not going to get those people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and also to kind of go back to your previous point before we kind of talked about Airbnb, like real estate in general, it like always soothes my soul whenever any investor is like, look, we get so anxious every single time we buy a new property. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how much magic from Airbnb I have like personally experienced watching it work. Like signing the mortgage to a property or signing a lease or like during that entire setup phase, like I just don't know anyone who doesn't experience that anxiety about like, am I putting my best foot forward? Is this one gonna like be the doozy and not produce, and like no one's gonna want it and no one's gonna rent it out, and like did I make this huge investment and all of a sudden it's just gonna flop? And so like, we, especially when we were designing for other people and we were like in that intimate stage with them on the front end of getting a property up and running, you're just like managing emotions at that point.
Yeah.
You're just like, please, for the love of God, work. And it always does, right? Like as long as you do it correctly, it always does. But just something about it, you just, you've always got that doubt in the back of your head.
It always works out though. Like, even if some people like, what if it doesn't work? I'm like, sell it, make it a long-term rental, live in it, try it again, like redo it. It's like, this isn't a permanent decision you're held to for the rest of your life. Like you can sell a property if it's not serving you. if Airbnb didn't work the way you expected, would a long-term rent, like some people don't like Airbnb. Like I know someone, I worked with her, I coached her a little bit, and she did it. And she's like, I just don't want someone in my house. And I was like, you tried it. Like now you know. But if you didn't do that, you would have never known if that would have been how you feel about it. And Airbnb isn't for everyone. Like my boyfriend, he does not respond to You should have heard his words when that lady was like, this is just not the vibe. I was like, oh boy, like I will be responding. Thank you. So it's not for everyone. You have to be very level-headed, very customer service oriented. And if it doesn't work for you, you didn't fail. Like you succeeded because you tried. And a lot of people won't get there. So that's my 2 cents.
That's such a good point. Such a good point. And like, what else are you going to spend your money on, right?
Yeah.
Something that's a one-time purchase. Like, at least you're taking an at-bat at something that's going to like feed you, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Obviously make educated decisions. Like investments need numbers ran. You guys don't just like free for all it.
Oh my God. I did. Even on this, like, even after doing arbitrage and we went to go buy this first house, like, one, I'm just like not a math girl, which is like, you know, in real estate, they're like, oh my God, what do you mean you're not a math girl? But two, it was like, you know, the market moves so fast, and to run numbers on everything, it takes a minute. And we wanted this house so bad. I mean, we had already done enough research knowing that we wanted a lakefront property. Like, we knew that a lakefront property in Michigan was going to turn a profit of sorts. You know, which lake it's on will determine how much profit and so on and so forth. And so, like, the day we toured the property, we actually, like, somebody had sent us a listing, and we wanted to be on a boat, and we got to where our boat was at, and we had it parked at a friend's house, and that friend was like having this like big family reunion, and we were like, oh, like we're interrupting, like never mind. And so Ethan was like, let's just go look at this property, which at the time we had never purchased a home. Like, we didn't know that, like, if you weren't being like guided through a like tour of a listing, you're not just supposed to like show up there and like say hi, like I want to look at this property. And so we like drive up, we're like in the front yard, we're like walking around, and the real estate agent was like, hey, how quickly can you get up to this property? Because they're closing offers on this property that went live today. And we like send her a picture of the front of the house, and we're like, we're here. And she's like,
oh my God,
what? Like, what? No, you can't do that. And she was like, oh my God, well, whatever. Like, you're lucky. Like, the tour that they're giving to other people doesn't happen for another hour. So let me see if I can get you the code to like walk through the house. And we walked through, and she was like, okay, if you want to put an offer on it, like, you need to put one on it today because they're closing bids today. Like, this is it. And so I just got on Airbnb. I saw that there were 2 other properties that were turning a good profit. I could see that they were booked out pretty far. And that is the math that I did. I was like, they're not designed well, they're not photographed well, and they're booked out far. Like, okay, that's enough for me. I'm just going off of a gut, and let's just run with it. And later on, we did the math, and we were like, oh my God, thank God this penciled. But like, just such a risky investment.
It really is. But I always like when you guys talk about like a mid-tier market versus the top tier, like competing with the big guys is not an easy feat, where sometimes just taking a little bit of a bigger risk in that mid-tier market's always worth it. That's my 2 cents. But like if you're, you know, 15 properties in, like maybe you're at the top tier level, but it is hard to compete and profit and get a return that you're expecting in those big markets. And I personally like don't have an interest to be in them because it is so difficult and there's so many.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Elefante made a video yesterday where someone asked him a question. They were like, is Gatlinburg still a good place to invest? And he was like, no, like what we're experiencing is compression, right? We're not seeing the same numbers we saw last year because we are in the 90th percentile still, but the 90th percentile has gotten so competitive that now prices are having to lower and profits are having to come down. And so I'm like, guys, that's what I'm talking about. Like if AirDNA is like, yes, go here, and there's a gazillion people there, you've kind of missed the boat.
Yeah. And honestly, it's interesting because he owns there and he's still saying that. And that speaks beyond what AirDNA could tell you. But it's so funny because I feel like Airbnb got this huge kick like a year or 2 ago, and it was about Gatlinburg and how well it was performing. And look at like everyone drove there, and the few people that pivoted and looked elsewhere, I'm sure are probably doing a killing right now because it is so competitive. And I wanted to invest in Gatlinburg, so I like can totally speak on that. And I went there and I was like, you know, I don't think I'd come back here really. I don't want to buy here. Like I want to enjoy where we own. But it is, yeah, it's super interesting. The top tier markets, Joshua Tree and Gatlinburg, it's a tough space to be in as a new investor, as your first one. I mean, you have a lot of learning to do. We all do, but
I can't imagine getting into those markets off the gate, right out the gate.
I know, it's tough.
The amount of failing we had to do by ourselves in a corner. Thank God we were in a market that allowed us to fail.
And those places are not cheap. Like when you make investments that are 800,000-900,000, I mean, you have a hefty mortgage to cover and you have a big property to furnish. And I don't think people realize that. Like when you start to have a mortgage of 5, 6, 7, 8,000, like you need to be covering and booking at a pretty good occupancy to cover that. But when your mortgage is 1, 2, 3,000, it's like you have room to wiggle and have different occupancies. But that's something I always say is like, I'll look at someone's calendar and I say, that's great, but how much did they pay for that house and what's their mortgage and expenses? Because that means more to me than that calendar being booked up. So
1,000%. Is it my turn for questions or is it yours?
It's yours.
Oh, okay. Okay. Next question we've got for you is, what is the most valuable piece of advice you've received from someone in regards to real estate investing?
I would say, it might be not like the number one, but it's the most that holds true every single time I talk to someone. And I talk to a lot of people about Airbnb, and this always resonates with someone that real estate is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's your own journey, because the power of social media has connected so many people like you guys and me and everything, but it also has shown success very quickly at an incomprehensible rate. You see all these people that have 6, 7 properties, they've retired, but you didn't see the years behind it. And my boyfriend and I, we always consider like there's build years and there's years where you act. And there's a lot of us in build years that you don't see what's going on behind the scenes. Like I've had, since I graduated college, 4 or 5 jobs at a time consistently, because it takes that to sometimes, people take sales jobs so they can earn more. Like you have to have those build years. And I always tell people it's a big decision. It's not a sprint. People make you feel like it is. If you aren't acquiring a property a year or multiple a year, you're behind. And houses are not going to fly away, you guys. Like we are okay. They will still be there. Obviously the market is a real thing, but I think that resonates with all types of real estate investors. The person who has 5 is looking at the person that has 10, and the person with 1 is looking at the person with 5. And everyone's on their own journey with real estate.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's so true. It's just one of those things that, I mean, you're like, and it always drives me crazy because like I'll post something about numbers on TikTok. I'll be like, guys, look at how much we made in the month of July or the month of August. And those videos will, before I even post them, I'm like, okay, this video is going to go viral. I know it's going to go viral. And then like we'll bring it back down and it'll be like, okay, look, this is the downside of it, right? Like here is the reality. Like we want to talk about like sacrificing and doing all these things, and it'll get like 150 views. And I'm like,
I know, it should be the other way. It needs to be the other way around.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, like, attention is valuable as a social media influencer. Like, you want those viral videos, you want people staring at you, you want to add value to people's lives. But then when you really give them the nitty gritty and you really like pull down the cloak and like show them the reality of it, they're like, no, I want the other video.
Like, I know, like no. The numbers, show me the profit. That same thing, like when I talk about how much a year or a glamping site can do, it's like all the interest, and then you show the day-to-day, the workload it takes to get there, and it's like, the numbers are better. But that's, it's like I try to show both to everyone. Like we do a lot of the work on our properties because it's saving money. And even though we have a profitable business, like business owners are only profitable because they cut expenses where they don't need to spend. And if that means the amount of times I have driven across the country to Colorado to do work, we're going there next week for 5 to 6 days of just straight, like, every day there's a task to get done because it's before season. So yeah, there's a lot of work behind the scenes and people just don't want to do it, which is those who act and those who don't, honestly, the difference.
Yep, absolutely. There's definitely some hustle.
For sure. Well, okay. Has there been any pivotal moments during your journey that changed your overall strategy for real estate investing?
Yeah, I'd say we pivot like every month. Like we are at the point where we started, the first experience we ever had with Airbnb was I said, oh, we're traveling a lot on the weekends. We should just like throw it up on Airbnb. And, you know, my partner, he's like, it's not ready. Like, I need to finish this. And I'm like, I'm taking photos while he's telling me it's not ready. I'm like, okay. Like, it's going up after this. So that was a big moment because like we just started and like tried. And that was a pivot of just like we were sitting on something that we weren't there a lot. So there's a lot of Airbnbs that do well in non-demanded tourist markets. So that was a pivot. And then when we decided to put a house for sale and put it on Airbnb and pivot there, and then we turned both properties into a full-time, we literally like made ourselves homeless, basically. Like we turned both properties into Airbnbs and ended up buying a van because we literally were sleeping on family and friends' houses and traveling to where we had like, I mean, the amount of clothes I have lost along the way has been incomprehensible. So there's been a lot of pivots, but I think the strategy has always been to obviously focus on what's working. Like numbers don't deny the business. And even though you're like, well, you know, I really think we should do a patio, not a hot tub this summer. And it's like, do you want the patio or do the numbers want the patio? Because someone is putting an emotional attachment to this and you need to decide what the numbers are going to do for your business. So we always keep that in mind, but we also understand it's a long haul and like we want to do what also works for our real life situation. And Airbnb is not all we do. Like we do a lot of other things. So even though we've had to take months where we aren't focusing on the business entirely of Airbnb, it still runs in the background by itself and makes money. But you have to work jobs to get those loans. So like, you know, you can't just put your hands up and hope for the best. I think that's the biggest mistake, that when people get 2-3 properties and they're making money to cover their bills and then something happens and they quit their jobs, it's like scary. But yeah, I think you just have to understand like there's a balance. You can't just 100% always dive in. A lot of these people that have retired from real estate have been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years. There's not many people that have done a retired career in the first year of real estate. So pivoting is essential to every small business, every entrepreneur. I work with a lot of small businesses beyond Airbnb. And if you don't know how to pivot, like the market and industry will just surpass you.
1000%. Yeah, that resonates too. I feel like, you know, when you have a W-2 job and you get comfortable in that W-2 job, when you walk into it originally, there's like this big learning curve, no matter what, right? Mm-hmm. And you embrace that learning curve, and then all of a sudden it becomes some sort of a routine. And, you know, the further you're in it, the more answers you have. And I just feel like that maybe to a certain degree it like carries over into real estate, but to a certain degree it doesn't at all. It's like you're constantly in this learning curve game where you're like they're just, everything moves, nothing is consistent, like markets change, interest rates change, houses change, like just everything all the time. And so you really have to like, you know, be willing to like stay in that learning curve game and be comfortable with that. And just like, again, it goes back to like being a problem solver. And I feel like those are the best people who really, really enjoy this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, solution-oriented mindsets will succeed. And if you panic or crumble under pressure in intense moments, it will be hard. Like I would tell someone to try, but if you really can't succeed in that environment, it's not going to feel passive. It's not going to be that fun for you. And you're probably going to realize that the income's not worth the struggle, which I know people that have done that. And they just decide, I don't care how much they pay my mortgage. I don't want to do it. And it's like, not everyone is meant to own an Airbnb. So that's perfect.
Right. We want good hosts in the space.
Yes.
All right. So we have one last question for you as we wrap up here. Mm-hmm. What is your least favorite part of the Airbnb process?
That is a great question. I would say my least favorite part of like the hosting process is probably easy to guess, but the problem guest situations. I don't take it personal, but like I really hold myself to a high expectation of like good customer service, and almost every single review we have is like, and people, you know, they think it's just me, but obviously there's 2 of us behind the scenes, but you know, Zoey responds so fast and she's so communicative. And when there's something I feel like I could have done better, you know, it's like, oh, that's, you know, I wish we could have solved that for them before it just like ended up as a review and we couldn't even have a chance to act on it. So that's just a hard part of being a host, and you just can't take those things personal. and it's a hospitality industry. You cannot please everyone. And I also think like people are like, well, I want to be the first booked home in our area. And it's like, you can't host everyone coming to this area. So like, why do you need to fit every single demographic and audience? Because you are not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Like people that don't want to drive on a dirt road, don't stay with us. I will tell you that. Like we are not it for you. It's just going to not be enjoyable for either of the parties. So I think the hosting is what you do the most. It's when you communicate with your guests. I talk to them quite often automatically, but they think it's me. Just kidding. But yeah, I think that you just can't take it personal, but it's a negative. And honestly, the business is challenging, and there are like one-off situations like the plumbing broke and stuff, but you really can't predict that. And it really just depends on like the house and the situation. So we haven't encountered anything catastrophic yet, but we have had guests walk from the home. But I know it's coming. Like I'm well aware it's coming one of these days. So
yeah,
hopefully not
right.
soon. Yeah.
That was Sean Raka. I don't know how to say his last name. I always butcher it. But I mean, him specifically, he put out a video maybe 2 months ago or so. But, you know, he's arbitrage master. So he's got more moving parts than anyone does who's in like the single family or glamping situation, right? Because they're all like one bed, one bath, or two bed, two baths. And someone had asked him if anyone has ever died in one of his properties.
Oh
and so he went through the math, right? He was like, we have X amount of guests per year in X amount of properties. He's like, the likelihood of someone not dying in one of my properties at this point is like slim to none. And he didn't like answer the question, but I was like, you're right. You know, like when you want to talk about like ultimate nightmare situations, like they like, it just makes me think of like hotels, like, holy cow, like what happens, like cleaners, what do they have to go through in a hotel situation?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And like managing all of those units. I mean, I can't even imagine, like once you get to like 10 Airbnbs, you're like, whoa, okay. Like I can't even imagine 50, 100 properties, but there's a lot of goods to it and a lot of positives. We've hosted like multiple engagements, multiple proposals, weddings, and that is like, I think we undermine like how cool that is. Like they say like, we will remember that for the rest of our life. And you were a part of it, whether you were there or not. And it's like, oh, just another day at the office. You know, it's like, that's so cool to be a part of that. And they picked your house because your experience is worth something to them. So we've had like lots of birthdays, I almost like want to use their photos, like their engagement photos in the listing, but I'm like, no, I won't do that. But I'm like, that's like great marketing.
Your TikTok where you were like, someone gets engaged at my property before I do, I nearly fell out of my chair. I was laughing so hard.
That was like one of my best. Like I sent it to my sister. I'm like, this is definitely one of my best pieces of work because this is like so funny. But it's funny because that was like the 5th proposal. Like I was like, geez, they are like really beating us to it around here. Like this has been going on for like a year now. But it was cool. It's super cool. We were actually at one of our properties and we were like driving up and we like saw them doing the like engagement stuff and we're like, whoa, let's turn around. Like we don't need to get, you know, we were like getting like checking in on something or getting them propane. And yeah, there's a lot of cool experiences, but they have beat us to it many times. I'm like, let's go, come on. But yeah.
Do you think there's an engagement in your near future?
Yes. I actually think when this will be out, it will be, hopefully partner becomes fiance. So we are doing
so
everything
exciting.
Backwards. Yeah, everything backwards. We're like booking things that probably shouldn't book when you're just dating, but that's a non-traditional way to do things, and that's what we're all about. And that's why we own Airbnbs and we don't own a house for ourselves. So
I bought my wedding dress before I was engaged, so I'm here for it.
I love it. Yeah, I like saw this date open up at like my dream spot. I'm like, do we take it? And then now we're on a 2-month wedding planning adventure. So we'll see.
That's amazing.
I didn't book anything beforehand, but I did tell my now husband, you have until the 31st of December. And he waited until
oh my gosh, I love
Christmas
it.
Eve. He waited till Christmas Eve, and I was like, we've been together 4 years. I don't know.
Let's go. I'm over here, I'm like, tax benefits. Like, do I need to spell it out for you? Like, let's go. Because you own it. I mean, I would never be in a partnership with someone with Airbnbs that, you know, you can't fully trust and everything. And no, you know, everyone out there that wants to partner with friends or acquaintances, like be very mindful because my hopefully fiance always says a partnership is like a sailing ship because it just does not usually end that well. So it is a real thing. I told myself I would like never buy certain things until I was married. So protect yourself out there, especially with real estate. Like that's
Especially
a big,
in real
have the
estate.
contracts. Yeah, the people that partner with like 4 or 5 people in a house, I'm like, kudos to you because I cannot imagine those contracts in writing and like all the details that have to happen. So, but it's a good way to get started.
Yeah, Emily and I have had our fair share of sticky conversations going into partnerships, so we are
Yeah.
familiar. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're right. You have to be selective with the people that you are binding yourself to in situations like this because it can go south very quickly. So,
Yeah. Yes.
well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This
Yes.
episode has had a million gems in it, so we are very excited to release it. Maybe we'll hang on to it until we see an engagement come out
Yeah.
and that we'll release.
This is like the announcement right here, guys. No, thanks for having me on, guys. It's like so fun. I love what you guys are doing, and the amount of valuable tips that all of you listeners have with these girls is beyond what I mean. We had none. So like take all of these with more than a grain of salt and apply them to your business.
Yes, well, thank you. And go ahead and plug all of your socials. Where can our listeners find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, just at Zoey Berghoff. I'm keeping my handles. I'm pretty sure Zoey Berghoff because there's like so many people know me as that. And if you ever want to work with glamping or anything like that, I do work with clients and coaching for those things as well as Airbnb and arbitrage. But yeah, just Zoey Berghoff. I keep it super simple. And feel free to message me. I respond to every single message I get. I like pride myself upon that. Comments, bear with me on the viral videos.
Good for you. Bear with me. Responding to every DM is hard.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I sit down on the treadmill for 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, it's my DM time. Like, let's respond to these people. So feel free to shoot me any questions you have. I'd like to help people, even if it's a quick tidbit for free. So.
Beautiful. We love
We'll link all of your stuff in the bio of the YouTube video or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those things. And you can find Sarah and I at superhostlabs.com, at superhostlabs on Instagram and TikTok. And Sarah and I are at the Carwells on literally everything. So that's where you can find us.
And thank you again to all of our listeners. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
See you later.